Hello guys, Appa here. Today we'll be looking into cantrips and how to sequence them properly, more than anything. I'm also going to go through individual card choices and what each cantrips tries to accomplish. I think I already addressed cantrips in my channel, but I wanted to really devote a full video to it so I can later on just point towards it and have that as a reference. So, um, what's the first thing that we need to know is exactly what a cantrip is. Probably you already know this, I want to assume, but if you don't, it's very easy. It's just a card that draws a card. So Rishtum is here, for example, is a blue mana for an instant that draws a card. So this card doesn't do anything, of course. This is a bad card, right? But it cantrips. So that's the definition of it. Then attached to a cantrip you can have multiple things. The most common, or the one that we are going to be looking at in this video, are cantrips that also filter your library in some way or another. So they have additional value in the sense that maybe they don't give you card advantage, right? For example, a divination, a draw 2 spell, you could consider it a cantrip because it cantrips, right? It replaces itself, but instead of having an additional benefit in the sense that it has filtering, well, divination has card draw. So the spells that we are going to be looking at today are these three here: Preordain, Ponder, and Brainstorm. So Preordain is very easy. It's the easiest one of the bunch. It's just scry through, then draw a card at sorcery speed. So this means that you can choose between you can look at two cards. If you like any of them, you can draw it for sure that turn. So that's pretty important. And if you don't like any of those, you can just put it in the bottom and draw a random card from the top of your library, basically. So this has several applications, but at a base level, it's just a filtering cantrip, right? It's just you get to choose what to draw in this turn, maybe in the following turn too. And if you are, for example, flooding and you see two lands, you can put those on the bottom, effectively drawing three cards because you don't want to draw those lands, right? So it has so much value in the late game. And in the early game, it can also really help you, for example, find your land drops. Um, or finding new threats or find whatever you're trying to find. So the value that the cantrips have, the filtering cantrips have, is that you float less and you have screw less, and at the same time you're most consistent at finding your pieces. So if you're playing a combo deck, for example, you are going to have a better deck by adding more cantrips because you're going to be able to find your pieces of the combo easier. And also in Delver decks, for example, or Fairy decks right now that are very popular, you can just find your interaction, your meaningful interaction in the matchup that much consistently. So, for example, let's say that you are playing Mono Black Control, you have a couple of Chainers Edict. You have two, right? So you want to find them. The only way that you can is by cantripping your clunky 2 or 3 mana spells that just draw cards, right? And they maybe dig 2 deep or 1 deep only. So on average, you're going to find your Chainers Edict about some amount of the time. Let's just say, for the sake of the argument, about 50% of the matches you're going to be able to find your Chainers Edict, right? Because you have cantrips and the games go long. And then, for example, in the blue-black Fairies deck, you only have one Chainers Edict, but you have like 8 or 9 cantrips. So you're going to be able to find it like 60% of the time. Even you have it less than the mono black deck, right? So these favorite decks have the advantage of being able to just put one offs or two offs and being able to find it more consistently than other decks. So it has all of these upside. What's the downside? What's the cost that we're paying? Well, it's twofold. The first one is that it uses one card in your deck, right? So even though this isn't that much of a cost, there is a cost to play more than 60 cards, right? And if you play only 60 cards, then you have only that amount of space to add spells. And if you use, for example, I don't know, 30 spells or 30 slots for filtering spells, then when you find your pieces, maybe you have like 10 actual spells in your deck. And if you can't win with that, then, well, you're out of luck. The second cost is that it costs 1 mana, of course. Um, it's not that much, right? It's a very cheap cost to pay for a spell. So that's why Preordain, Ponder, and Brainstorm are such a mainstay in our format. We are going to see it all the time because they're super efficient in what they do, and the cost isn't that high, actually. So this is I organized the cantrips in 3 tiers here. I have the preordains, the ponders, and the brainstorm as tier 1. These, if you are looking for cantrips in your deck, more often than not, you're going to be fine with like 4 preordains and 3 ponders or something like that. Or maybe a couple of brainstorms, depending on what you're trying to accomplish with your cantrips. So, well, I'm just going to read through them a bit more quickly here. I don't want this video to be like 30 minutes long, but Ponder helps you find the top 3 of cards of your library instead of the 2, but it's not a scry 3. If it was a scry 3, it would be broken. So you can either choose to keep all of them or none of them. So even though it digs a bit deeper, right, it lets you look at one card more. It has a downside that you can just put whatever, right? You can't just say, okay, I'm going to keep this one and these two I'm going to put in the bottom. You can't do that as you can with preordain. So preordain is always super good. And every turn you start and you cast a preordain, you're going to end up in a better position more often than not. And with ponder, sometimes you have to make bad decisions, right? You're forced to maybe say, okay, I have like I don't know, a fairy canonade that I need to cast, or I lose, and 2 lands. So if I keep this, I'm going to be able to survive a couple of turns, but I know I'm drawing dead for a couple of turns. So that wouldn't happen with Preordain. You just put the lands on the bottom and be happy with that. So Ponder is super strong, of course, but it's better if you have other pieces with it. For example, shuffle effects. You can just draw your canonade and then shuffle the 2 lands, and you're happy with that. Brainstorm then is the last in the tier 1 list here. This is draw 3 cards and put 2 from your hand on top of your library in the order. So the ways that this was designed was to just add cards to your access and instant speed, right? The way that this card was thought about was, okay, I need to respond to this player, right? So I'm going to draw 3 cards, put 2 cards on the top, and maybe find the counter spell that I need, and I'm going to draw that for a couple of turns, or I know already what I'm drawing, so it's kind of a downside, right? You can't just put them, if it was draw 3 and put 2 on the bottom, for example, it would be broken because you can always filter your hand. So the way that you break the symmetry, or the way that it was designed to, is with shuffle effects and scries and all that. So you really need to support brainstorm, or it's mediocre at best, right? It's kind of bad when it's used in that way. Sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes you just need to do a naked brainstorm trying to find your counterspell, and if you don't find a shuffle effect, then you're out of luck. And sometimes you're fine with that, but the way that this is used in the format is to be able to have a late game cantrip, right? That really allows you to make massive transformations in your hand, right? Changing 2 cards in your hand for other 2 random cards in your library is a broken thing to do. So Brainstorm, Ponder, and Preordain are the strongest, and Preordain is just good on its own. Ponder is great if you support it, okay if you don't, and Brainstorm is bad if you don't support it, and awesome if you do, right? That's why Brainstorm is so used in Legacies, because they have all these fetch lands, so it's so much better. And here you normally see Preordain and Ponder used first before the first Brainstorm, but some decks maybe change it around. Then we have other cantrips like Impulse, Sleight of Hand, and Opt. I'm going to be hovering over this, I'm not going to read them all, but basically the way that these all work, even though Opt says Cry 1, what they do is you choose you look at some number of cards, and then you choose to keep one of them basically and put the rest on the bottom. So it doesn't fix your future draws, but it really helps you dig for a specific card. So if you do Impulse in response to something, and maybe you're finding your counterspell, let's say, right? You need to counter the spell that your opponent is playing, or you are going to lose. So you Impulse in response, find your counterspell, counter it, and you're fine with that. Exchange, the top of your deck is clean so you don't know exactly what you're going to draw. So it doesn't fix your future draws, but it's really good at digging because it digs 4 deep instead of maybe 2 deep like sleight of hand or 1 deep like opt. Well, opt, you could argue it digs 2 deep. So, but whatever. This is the tier 2 list. Some decks play these cards. For example, a deck that tries to play at instant speed might try to opt for opt if they can instead of ponder, for example, because they want to have access to instant speed cantrips, right? Because they want to hold mana all the time. You've seen this in mono blue control lists from some time ago where they play like opt and force spike, so they wanted to hold that mana on turn one, and if they weren't able to counter something, they will opt in the end of turn, fixing their draws. Sleight of hand, you may see it sometimes in uh, turboxerox combo decks, right? That they play like, I don't know, maybe 30 cantrips and try to find some pieces. And Sleight of Hand is one of the best of the 1 mana cantrips. That is, of course, in terms of power level, a bit lower than Ponder Brainstorm and Preordain. Impulse you see it in Tron because they try to find their mana in the early game. So the way that their deck works is that they could play like Preordain, for example, but uh, they normally play a Tabland on turn 1 and a Tron on turn 2, so it's better to play an Impulse in that deck, right? So it's just a bit of sequencing that they choose to use Impulse, but if they were able to play Ponders and Preordain, they would probably do so. Then we have, this is the tier T list, the tier 3 list. We have cards that are just niche, like Portent. This is a ponder, but you can look at the opponent's library if you want to, and the draw is delayed. So you can use this if you're trying to lock your opponent out somehow, or if you want the delayed draw for some reason, like miracles or something like that. Serum Visions is like almost, you could argue, it's a strictly worse Preordain, but I don't know, maybe you have this card and you don't have Preordain. I've seen it played, but I never actually thought it was correct to do so. And Telling Time, the same thing, is like a bad impulse. You can look at the top 3 cards of your library and you put one in your hand, one in the bottom, and one in the top. So it fixes your draws a bit, but you sometimes don't want to put something on top, but you don't have a choice. So it's kind of weird, right? So this is the tier 3 list. This is cards that you have to have reason to play, basically. If you have one of these in your deck, it's because you're trying to accomplish something in specific. This is the tier 2 list is mostly because you are choosing, of course, making a conscious decision to put opt instead of preordain. Maybe it's because budget, maybe it's because you have also reason to put this. For example, you want the instant speed draw, or you want to dig really deep for a combo piece, or maybe you have few shuffle effects, right? Because all of these are very good without shuffle effects. Ponder, it might be a bit worse than sleight of hand if you don't have shuffle effects. You could argue, but I still think you don't. And tier 1 list is just cards that are good, right? So we talked a lot about all of these cards in relation to shuffle effects. So I have prepared here all the things that interact with cantrips, not only the shuffle effects. Of course, the first one is Ash Barrens, Evolving Wilds, just lands that shuffle your library. These are very good with Brainstorm, these are very good with Ponder, and they are a bit tricky to play with Preordain, right? Because if you play a Preordain and then shuffle, you kind of lose your scry. So if you know you're only going to be shuffling and playing a Preordain, you normally want to shuffle first, so you have your scry to later for value, right? And if you have Ponder and Brainstorm, you always try to hold on to your shuffle effects, if possible. So even if you say, I have 4 cards, one of them is a Brainstorm and a shuffle effect, I like all of my cards. I don't want to shuffle any of those with Brainstorm. Still, you want to Brainstorm and then shuffle, because if you draw dead cards, you want to shuffle those, right? So it's very important to really think about that. So we have all of that. Shuffle effects. I'm going to remove this. We are not going to be talking more about this. Yeah. So we are going to only talk about the important countries, right? So these ones are like this, in my opinion, in terms of relations with the shuffle effects. Brainstorm is better than Ponder, and Ponder is better than Preordain with shuffle effects. Um, Additionally, you have cards like Fairy Seer and Hour of Bolas. We are, are already almost assembling a deck here, but bear with me. So, Fairy Seer, when it enters the battlefield, you scry 2. Um, this is not card advantage, and this is not a cantrip, but it's awesome card filtering, right? We already saw that with Preordain, scry 2 and draw card makes it a super strong card. So this is basically the same thing if you consider a 1 mana 1/1 flyer as a card, and some decks do. So in those decks, 1 mana 1/1 flying fairy that when it enters scry 2 is very strong. So what the cards does with other cantrips is help you dig really deep or fix your draws. For example, you play a Ponder, then you play a Fairy Seer, you're able to scrape the bad cards on the bottom, making it a very good card, the Ponder. Of course, you can do the same thing with a Brainstorm, and with Preordain, you normally want to do Fairy Seer first and then Preordain sometimes, because you are going to scry 2, then scry 2, then draw a card. So that basically help you dig up to 4, yeah, up to 4 or 5, basically, because you also draw a card if you put all of those on the bottom for a specific card if you want to. But it also maybe helps, like you do Preordain, you put 2 on the bottom, you draw, then you play Fairy Seer and you scry for the next turn, basically. So it helps you with that. Then we have Ogre of Bolas, which is you look at the top 3 and you reveal an instant or sorcery and put it in your hand. So if this was a 2 mana 1/3 that draws a card, it would be way easier to play. But it's not, right? You need to play a lot of instant and sorceries. So you're going to see this card a lot in decks that play a lot of instant and sorceries, like the cantrips. As we saw before, the cantrips occupy a lot of space in your deck. So having an Ogre of Bolas in your cantrip deck really help you make that a better choice, right? Because you have like maybe 30 spells, so your Ogre of Bolas is going to blind flip a lot of the time. Additionally, Ponder and Brainstorm really help you flip your Ogre of Bolas, basically having more value in it. So what you normally want to do is play Ponder first, try to find the card that you want, for example, I don't know, the Row of Secrets or whatever, some card is relevant in the matchup, and then you put like an instant sorcery on top, like a Preordain, and then you play your Ogre of Bolas, draw that Preordain, and you're sure that you're going to get value from it. So yeah, and an important note here is that right now I'm talking for maximum value. So this means that there are two things that you can do with cantrips, I think, on sequencing cantrips basically, which is for maximum value and for maximum digging. So if you're digging for a one-off or a two-off that you need to find or you lose, like for example you're playing against elves and they have a really big board of elves and you need to fight a fairy Chironite, then you want to sequence your spells a bit differently than when you are just playing the mirror and you want to have all the value possible, right? Not draw any lands, don't draw any dead cards, just draw gas all the time because you need to keep up or you are going to lose. So with that in mind, if you try to play for maximum value right now, what you want to do is play the Ponder, put a non-instant sorcery in your hand, and then play the Hour of Bolas and flip that instant sorcery in your hand, right? Because that way you are getting 2 cards for sure instead of maybe basically maybe you play a Ponder, you have counterspell and land and you don't want to draw lands. You put the counterspell in your hand and play Hour of Bolas and put those 2 lands on the bottom for sure and maybe draw a card, right? So that's something that you need to take into account because that depends on what game you're playing and what's more valuable for you. Normally what you want to do is just draw the land and play the Hour of Bolas and find that counter spell, but it depends of course on the matchup and what is happening in the matchup right now. And then the same thing with Fairy Seer, you can do this before the Preordain to find something, right, to dig in really deep for a card, or you can play it after a Preordain to just set up your draws and have more value that way. So this, of course, all of this depends on what match you're playing and what game you're playing and what's important in that match. But normally you want to do that in that order. But let's say, for example, as again, we are trying to find a specific card, and you have a ponder and a fairy seer in your hand. How do you sequence that? As we said, the most value play is play the ponder first and the fairy seer. But in this instance, you are trying to find a specific card, and if you don't find it, you lose. So what you want to do is play the fairy seer, scry 2 if you just put all the cards that don't matter in the bottom, and if you find the top card to be the card you are looking for, then you just count the ponder droid and you're happy with that. This way, instead of digging only 3 deep, because you play the ponder then the fairy seer, you are only digging 3 deep. And what you can do is play the first year, dig 2 deep, then play the ponder, dig 3 deep. So you dig do 5 cards for the specific card that you're trying to find. So that makes it a bit better in that respect. The same thing with brainstorm is more or less analog with ponder, so I'm not going to talk that much about it. Then we have other cards like accumulated knowledge, which is the better you find, the merrier, the better, right? So sorry, the more you find, the better. That's the saying. So what you're trying to do here with cantrips is use your cantrips to try to find the accumulated knowledge, and then use accumulated knowledge to refuel your hand and have more spells to your disposal, right? So yeah, so that's basically it. It's similar to when you're trying to find a one-off. Sometimes you chose to lose value, for example, in filtering your deck because you're trying to really hard to find your accumulated knowledge, to cast it, and you don't care. Sorry, you don't care about filtering there because you're going to have like 3 more cards than you had before. So that's way better than maybe Scry 2 here or there, right? So what you're trying to do if you're in an accumulated knowledge deck, you sometimes want to forfeit value, forfeit filtering, and play first your fairy seer and then the ponder, trying to find the accumulated knowledge, right? Maybe not with brainstorm, because as we said before, brainstorming and locking yourself is awful, so you try not to do that. But with ponder and fairy seer, it may make sense to just play the fairy seer first and then the ponder, trying to find your accumulated knowledge. Same thing, kind of with Monarch cards. So Monarch is a mechanic that's completely broken in 1v1, unless you basically draw a card each turn, and it's very hard to interact for your opponent. So maybe you're trying to find the Monarch in your deck to really push forward. So that way you, again, you try to dig deep instead of trying to set up your draws, right? So that's a trade-off, and it's something you need to take into account, that sometimes digging is more important than value, because you are digging for value, right? That's the kind of mechanic that I'm trying to find. Here I put a braid as a one-off, right? When you're trying to find your one-off, it's good that you're playing a turboxerox deck with a lot of cantrips, because that lets you find it more consistently. So that's why it's here. Then we have I put other cantrips here that don't really look like cantrips, like Prophetic Prism and Fire Eyes. So Fire Eyes is either a removal spell or a cantrip that does a minor thing. So I sometimes put this deck in my deck. Sorry, I put this card in my deck, thinking of it as a cantrip, right? So the way that works is, maybe I say, okay, I have this thing twice, but I have this interaction, but I want to have my cantrips. So what I do is change one thing twice for a Fire Eyes, so that way I have access to more removal spells and the same amount of cantrips, even though the cantrip itself is a bit worse than thing twice, right? So that's basically the idea of this. There are several cards that you can do the comparison to, that are just cantrips that do a minor thing or give you more room, right? More flexibility in your gameplay. And in control decks and decks that really play the long game, having access to that flexibility can be very important. Maybe less so in decks that are really linear, right, and try to assemble a combo or an interaction. In those decks, you don't really care about flexibility. You care about consistency. So if I were playing, for example, a combo deck, I wouldn't think of playing Fire Eyes. If I could, I would put like Impulse instead, right? Because it digs so much deeper for my combo piece. But that's the important decision their distinction. Sorry. Then Prophetic Prism is also a cantrip, even though it doesn't look like. So again, this is a card that stays on the board and gives you an advantage in for the rest of the game in filtering your colors, but it's a bit different than other cantrips. And then I had like Mortuary Mire as a card that just puts cards on top of your library. Again, if you are playing, for example, familiars that plays Mortuary Mire, cantrips, and some creatures, you put on top your Drifter with the Mortuary Mire. It's better to just hold up to your Ponders and Preordains to cast them and then draw that Drifter so you can cast it that turn, right? A mistake I made in the past, for example, all the time with Mystic Sanctuary in Fairy decks, was to play the Mystic Sanctuary, put something on top, and then cast the Fairy Seer, realizing my mistake later that I just put something on top that I want to keep there. So I'm losing value in the Fairy Seer because it is Christ 2, and I'm looking one that I know I want to keep in there. So in that deck, you would normally just play the Fairy Seer first, scry to the bottom the cards that you don't like, and then play the Mystic Sanctuary, putting something on top that you want to draw anyways. But yeah, that's basically it. So all of these are the interactions that I found were interesting to talk about. Of course, you can combine this Ponder with Brainstorm, Preordain with Brainstorm, Ponder with Preordain. And the way that that works is when you cast, for example, when you have a Brainstorm in your hand, you're always trying so hard for it to be good, right? So sometimes it's okay, it's correct to cast your Brainstorm and then cast Preordain to put the bad cards on the bottom and draw a random card. But that's basically a bit worse than doing a shuffle effect, for example, because you're using your Preordain only for cleaning the top and you are not using the scry to your advantage. You already know what you're going to scry to with. So the same thing with Ponder. If you Brainstorm and then Ponder shuffle for sure, and then draw a random card, you are basically doing Brainstorm, the good Brainstorm, which is a very strong card, and then 1 mana basically Reach Through Mists, because you're drawing a random card, right? You are not going to get any additional value. So when you cast cantrips with Brainstorm, of course, sometimes it's correct to play Brainstorm then cantrip and just use it to clean your Brainstorm, but sometimes it's correct to just do the other way around and try to find a shuffle effect with Ponder, for example. But that really depends on the texture of your hand and what you're trying to accomplish in that game. So I just wanted to put it out there because you can actually use Ponder and Preordain to shuffle your Brainstorm, but you don't really want to. That's the big deal. And then another thing is that yeah, you can do Ponder, put 3 on top, then cast Preordain and put 2 on the bottom. The same thing as we said before, you're basically doing a good Ponder and a Reach Through Mists, which is okay. Sometimes you want that, but it's not that good. And yeah, and this is all for value. If you are trying to dig for a combo piece or a one-off in your deck that you really need to find, then normally works the other way around. You cast your Ponder, dig 3 deep, right? Then if you don't find it, you shuffle and then cast Brainstorm. So that way you look at 4 cards with a Ponder plus 3 cards from Brainstorm. And if your Brainstorm block, you don't care because you already lose, right? Because you're trying to dig really deep for that one-off or whatever to not lose or to win the game. So if you are in a do or die situation, that's correct to cast your Ponders and then Brainstorm last. And that way you are forfeiting value, but you don't care because you're trying to win the game in that moment, or you're trying to not lose the game in that moment. So it's the only thing that you can do is to dig as deep as you can. So first Ponder, then Brainstorm in that sense. And the same thing with Preordain or with all these cards. Just use the cards that don't set up your top deck for sure last. That would be the heuristic. So if you have Ponder and Preordain and you're trying to find your combo piece, first Preordain, put 2 on the bottom if you don't find it, and then Ponder. because if you do it the other way around, uh, well, you did the same thing with these two cards, but you're going to shuffle first three cards that you know you don't want to draw, so it's a bit worse in that respect. Um, so yeah, that's basically it for all of this. I think I went through all I wanted to talk about. Yeah, uh, yeah, I have a little notebook with the things I wanted to talk about. So just to showcase a bit about what I'm talking about, I'm going to show you a deck that I just in a deck from Raptor, which is a combo deck. It's called Blue Black Free. It plays lands, it plays snow covered islands, and doesn't play any black spells, even sorry, any swamps, even though it has some black spells. I'm going to go into that in a bit later. It plays Dimmer Aqueduct, and the combo deck here is, oh sorry, the combo here is Wind Sandycon, transforming your Dimmer Aqueduct into a creature, right? And then free from the real on Dimir Aqueduct, so you can tap it for blue, then untap, sorry, you tap it for blue black, then untap it with blue, so you have one black floating, so you have infinite black mana. And when you have infinite black mana, you can kill with either Blood Rite Invoker here, with infinite mana you just drain your opponent out, or with Brush with Death, which is a kind of a bad card that for 7 mana you drain your opponent for 2. Since you have infinite black mana, you just kill them with this, and then uses this perplex with transmute basically to find your combo pieces. It finds free from the real or any of your kill spells. So you play 4 aqueducts, 4 Sendicons, and 4 free from the real with some redundancy in finding free from the real, for example, and the invoker on Brush with Death. So yeah, I know what you are thinking. This is a clunky 3 card combo, right? So why are you going to play this deck? It doesn't really look that good, right? Because each individual combo piece is kind of bad on its own, right? So what are you trying to accomplish here? Well, the reason you play this deck is because it's super consistent. Even though it doesn't look like, it's very consistent. And the reason it's so consistent is that it plays all of these cantrips. And I've seen other builds with more cantrips even. So you play 4 Brainstorm, 4 Ponder, 4 Preordain, 4 Impulse. So that's 16 spells that just cantrip and fire spells. And to make Brainstorm and Ponder work, you play 6 shuffle effects. Okay? In Evolving Wells and Ash Barrens. In addition to the random shuffle effects like Merchant Scroll and Perplex, you have like good access to shuffling here. So this deck plays the cantrips in a different way that we talked before. It uses them to dig really deep for the combo pieces, but it sometimes needs to play the value game because it knows that, okay, if I dig really deep for one combo piece but I don't have the other 2 right now, it means that I'm going to, for example, brainstorm block myself. I know I'm not going to draw my combo pieces in 2 more draw steps, so it's kind of bad. So yeah, it has all of that. Additionally, now what I see about it, you can brainstorm and then impulse, for example, clean your brainstorm. Then the rest of the deck is more consistency in Merchant Scroll and Perplex for finding things, Snap to basically interact with your opponent a bit, and also untapping lands is super useful when you're trying to combo off, because untapping this generates mana. And then you have like Giga Draws and Dispel as interaction in the main deck. So if you wanted to play this deck and you want to forfeit some interaction, you can remove all of this and play more cantrips, like Sleight of Hand and Opt, for example. They just make your deck that much consistent. And then in the sideboard it has some cards. It doesn't really matter for us. It has 1 Forest because it has the shuffle effects for some anti-aggro stuff, but that's mostly it. So I wanted to jump with this into a solitaire and just show a bit how I cantrip here. So let's jump into that. Alrighty, we are testing Blue Black Free to showcase some cantrips here. I'm going to mulligan this card. The hand, it has slow mana and only 1 combo piece. This doesn't have mana. Okay, we're going low. Okay, I'm going to keep because we're going to mulligan. I mulligan to 4, so I'm going to put two semicolons on the bottom, and I think a brainstorm because we don't have any way of shuffling with this. So this is going to be interesting because, oh well, we draw that. So here I can do two separate things. I can either preordain this turn and then the following turn shuffle, then preordain, or I can shuffle now for a blue. Of course, we're going to fetch blue and then try to do two preordains in one turn. I think I want to save the shuffle effects in case we find like a ponder. Yeah. So here the miracle that we need for the game is one of our combo pieces, so I'm going to keep it. And I'm thinking of keeping the ponder since we have the ash baron, so we can do like ponder. No, if we do ponder right now, no, I'm going to keep the ponder for digging because next turn I'm going to do preordain, play the aqueduct, and bounce the island. So I'm going to keep both. So an important thing to know about cantrips is that you always want to know what you are digging for, right? So in this situation, what we are digging for are free from the real and a kill spell, right? So in that regard, Giga Draws, for example, we know it's not what we want. And then we have cards like Impulse, which are just digging, right? It digs 4 deep, but we already have a ponder, so I'm not really sure what's the correct play here. Let me think. Next turn we are going to have 3 mana, so I think I'm going to keep Impulse just because it's going to be the most mana efficient play we can do because it uses the black mana from the Mirror Aqueduct. And other cantrips don't. So if we put this on bottom and find a ponder, then we are actually a bit worse, you know. Play the Aqueduct here, bounce this, pass. Okay, so now we are going to probably ponder an Impulse. I'm going to try and find, I think, brainstorm soon. So I'm going to actually start with Impulse. Yeah, we have here brainstorm and cards that we don't really care about. So I'm going to keep the brainstorm. And an interesting thing you can do here, for example, is either ponder or brainstorm now, and then on your upkeep shuffle. And I think I'm going to do that. I only have one card I want to shuffle, so I think I'm going to save the brainstorm for now. Brush with Death, Dispel and Snap. So I think I need this to win, so I'm going to keep all of this on top and shuffle on my upkeep. Because if I don't shuffle in my upkeep, I'm going to draw like bad cards. Let's find a blue now. Okay, so now we have all the combo pieces, right? So if I tap out for Queen Sendicon and free from the real, we actually lose because if the opponent has any kill spell, we die. So I'm going to actually play this and brainstorm. Right, next turn I'm going to have 5 mana, so it's going to be 1, 2, 3, and tap, and we win. So I'm going to do brainstorm to see if we find anything else that we care about. We actually don't. Doesn't matter, we can preordain those on the bottom. Yeah, doesn't really matter because we now have the win, right? So we play the land, we tap this, we transform this into a creature. We put this here, we untap this, you know, and you do the combo, right? You just generate mana. Might you do it like once just to show it, and you just cast this with buyback a lot of times. So that's how you win the game. Of course, here since we lose life and gain life at the same time, it doesn't really work. But we were able to win on turn 5 on the play, and no, on the draw. I think we draw a card with a mulligan to 4. So that shows how important it was to cantrip, right? Yeah. Yeah. let's go again. Here we have two combo pieces. We have the aqueduct and the wind syndicate. We have a lot of dead cards here, so if I keep this, I'm going to ponder for a brainstorm basically. So I could ponder right now, or I could save it, try to find a shuffle effect. If I find a shuffle effect, I can actually use it on the upkeep. So actually I think this is good. We can keep the perplex and the merchant scroll. And we can use the merchant scroll to find a, I'm not sure exactly if we can find a combo piece this way. We can find another perplex, for example, but I don't think we want that. So here right now we have the option of either going with brainstorm because we have so many dead cards and shuffling with perplex, or going with impulse, try to dig really deep, or perplex again. And the thing is, you can't really cast two perplexes, so we will be going to turn turn 4 cast a perplex to 5 cast a perplex. So I think we would be dead. Oh, I mean, if we find the perplex, this means that we have like an assured turn 6 win, because you can actually perplex the turn you're going off, but you need 1 extra mana. So that's one route that we would go. Let's say that we don't have that. Let's see. If I find an impulse or a brainstorm, I have so many dead cards I want to find the brainstorm. I'm going to fit the impulse because next turn we're going to have access to 2 mana. We're going to do that. So brainstorm, impulse here. We find ponder and shuffle effect. I'm going to go for ponder because we can actually shuffle with the perplex. And we can discard a land, we have so many. So right now we do ponder first. We find the fruit from the real. So that's good news. And we can actually perplex right now for the kill spell. Let's say Blue Bright Invoker, just to show that kill instead. And then we can just go off, right? Do this, do that, play this, untap. So that way we generate infinite mana and just play the Invoker and kill them with the activated ability. So again, we were able to go off on turn 5, even though we have like 4 dead cards in hand or something. So this showcases how important it is to cantrip and how this deck is so consistent, even though it has some few combo pieces, if you will, right? Because it's a 4-card combo, you have to have all of these to win. And we were able to both times just win on turn 5. One with a mulligan to 4 and one with a virtual mulligan to 5. The same thing because we have 2 Giga draws that we were able to play. So, yeah, that's basically it. I don't remember if I talked super hard on how I cantripped, if I really showcased that we are trying to cantrip for digging instead of for value sometimes, and sometimes the other way around. But yeah, that's basically it. Thank you so much for watching. If you watched the whole video, just let me know with a comment. I really enjoy talking about Magic, so if you have any questions, any comments on either the gameplay, the explication, or anything, just let me know. And thank you so much for watching, and see you next